Hi, Sandra. Nice
Hello.
to meet you. Nice. Thank you for coming on board. I'm a bit, you know, excited because this is my first interview for Black and Organic. So thank you so much.
Oh,
Uh,
pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm just going to ask a few questions because you're a naturopath, a herbalist. You have your own practice in London. You teach it, so you're a superstar. And I guess I could let you introduce yourself, but you do a lot of great things in this space. I'm going to ask you a few questions, kind of about your background and how you got into herbalism, and then get into a bit of a conversation about stress and sleep and
Mhm.
those things that affect us all when we have, live in the world actually. That's
Mm,
that's what's going
mm.
on. Um, so just to let everyone know who may not know, what is a naturopathic herbalist? What are naturopaths? What do they do?
Well, a naturopath is essentially the best way of thinking about it. It's a bit like the GP of the natural world. So, like you would go to your GP, your doctors, they're the sort of generalist. So, a naturopath is the GP of the natural world, and they might use a range of modalities to support health. And then my area of specialism is herbalism. So that is how I would approach. So that's my area of specialism. So that's why I've got qualifications in both. So I'm both a naturopath and a herbalist. So that's probably the best way of describing it in a simple way.
Thank you. And most people get confused between herbalists and homeopaths. And I think it's because they both dispense things. So you do get something. But what's the main
Yeah.
difference between?
Well, the main difference is really it's actually quite different. The approach is very different as well. In very simple terms, in a way, if you think of health on a continuum, homeopathy works on an energetic level, and it has a philosophy of sort of treating symptoms similar with similar. So the remedies that you get can be not just plant material; they're very, very dilute. So they work on more of an energetic level, whereas herbal medicine, the yes, we are dispensing things as well, but you're actually getting plant material, whether that's a tincture or a powder. So that's working on a physical level. So I suppose it's a bit like just as you would take medicines, but they're just sort of herbal, made of plants, essentially.
Oh, that's really good because I do like homeopathy, but I like the fact that plants do lots and lots of different things. And I know that in homeopathy, they have specific actions, the little
They
pill
do,
use.
yes, yes, and there are very similar similarities in that if you go to see a homeopathic practitioner, they will take a very long case history, looking into your not just what you've come to see them about, but also your lots of questions about your history, medical history, etc. And also, any naturopathic practitioner or herbalist will also do quite a detailed case history as well. So there are some similarities, but essentially they are different disciplines.
That's great. Oh, thank you for clarifying that. And what made you choose naturopathic herbalism? Like, why did you go down this journey and how did you become the natural doctor?
Wow, the Natural Doctor is the name of my consultancy, my health consultancy. And I thought I chose it because I just thought it was an easier way for people to understand what it is you do rather than explaining a naturopath or terms like that, which perhaps people might not be familiar with. And as I think with most people who get into any sort of natural health practice as a herbalist or a naturopath or nutritionist, whatever sort of modality you want to go into. I think most of us have generally had maybe some sort of health concern that we're not, maybe hasn't been very well addressed, going down the sort of the orthodox route. And we've been looking for alternatives. Or, as in my case, I've always had, since childhood, I've always had an affinity with natural approaches. When I was a little girl, I used to try and make my own sort of natural kind of cosmetics, and I sort of dabbled and things like that. So I've always had that affinity since childhood. And also because I think I grew up in a house where the first port of call were herbal remedies, home herbal remedies, kitchen remedies, using kitchen spices and things, which are all very medicinal.
Yeah.
So that was always our first port of call in my household, and when I was growing up. So I've always had a natural affinity. But I didn't know that you could do this as a job when I was at school. And it wasn't until later on as an adult that I then found, oh gosh, you can actually study this, and you can study to be a herbalist, and this is the real thing. And that's then what I did. I actually retrained as a herbalist and a naturopath. And the reason why the naturopathy was important to me, not just being, there's lots of different types of herbalists. So some herbalists are, uh, you know, uh, either medical herbalists or different types of herbalists that essentially they take the same approach as, a doctor would, but they just swap medicines for herbal alternatives. Which is fine. But the approach that you take as a naturopath is, you treat the root cause, not just the symptoms. So if you're not really addressing the root cause of your issues, it doesn't matter whether you're taking something herbal or something that's medicinal. You're not really addressing the root cause, right? So,
Yeah.
do we want to, for example, if we're somebody that's always getting headaches all the time, do we want to just pop a pill or just take a herbal equivalent if we're maybe not looking at, well, maybe we're not drinking enough water, maybe we're staring too much at our computer screen, maybe we're a bit stressed, is that why we're constantly getting headaches?
Yeah.
Far better to deal with that, than always treating the symptoms. And so that's what a naturopathic approach does. You do both, but you want to address the fundamental root cause, because if you do that, then you're not going to have those issues later on. So
That's
so that's why I got into it. And also I just love herbs. I love plants. Also, for me, it was a sense that this was ancient wisdom, the wisdom of our ancestors. Herbal medicine has been used by humans for thousands of years, and there's evidence of this. We know there's evidence of in ancient Egypt, ancient Greeks. We have got lots of evidence for human use of herbal medicine. So for me, it was tapping into that ancient wisdom, bringing it up to date into the modern world, and seeing that it has real practical applications and uses. So, once you have that knowledge, it's yours forever. No one's going to take it away from you. So, that's why I get very excited about herbs.
oh,
You
that's
see me
amazing.
rambling on.
No,
Sorry.
no, it's fantastic because it's similar. If you got a cold, you weren't just running out to the doctor or something like that. It starts in the kitchen. And I think all of us, we have these remedies, but we tend to kind of downplay it as, no one feels like going to the doctor. That's why we're using these herbs or cayenne. It's common in our house. We use pepper. Every time you got a cold, you would have all
Yeah,
the peppers. So you have cayenne pepper tea, and people are like, "Why would you drink cayenne pepper in a tea?" But
yeah,
that's very similar to lots of herbal remedies, and I think that's fantastic. This wisdom, once you have it, it's yours. You can, in any circumstance, you can take it with you. So no, that's really great. Really great. I get excited too about herbs. I have more questions for you, but now I'm like, oh, herbs. Um, so what does a naturopathic herbalist do in a day? And you touched on green allopathy, that it's not sort of the thing where you're sitting there and kind of just giving you a pill, you're going more in depth.
mm,
But if you would
mm.
talk through sort of what a day looks like for someone who runs their own herbalist practice, what do you do? How do you prep, just to get people a flavor of the profession?
Yeah, so it's quite varied. So it might involve seeing patients, or it might be involving, in my case, I do quite a lot of education work. So if I'm seeing patients, for example, or clients, there will be usually quite a lot of research involved. So, when you go to see a herbalist, for example, you might think that you're just going to see them, but and you're spending a bit of time with them, but they've probably been doing quite a bit of research before you've even arrived about your health concern that you have and that you're going to see them about. So they might be doing a bit of preparation, reading, and research. So herbalists do a lot of research to make sure they're up to date with the latest information. Then I would spend, so a first consultation, I would spend an hour, and this is the key difference. So some people will spend an hour or an hour and a quarter or so with a patient. And this is, I think, the real difference that people feel when they go to see any natural healthcare practitioner, and a herbalist in my case, is the time. If you go to see your GP, you get 10 minutes, if at
That.
most. Then you're not going to really get a good picture of somebody's health. Whereas, I spend an hour with my patients. So I ask lots of questions about not just what they've come to see me about, but also about them, their medical history, their family history, their any sort of childhood diseases. And I go through every single body system. And this is so that I can get a really good picture of their overall health. Because as a herbalist, what I'm doing is I'm not treating an illness, I'm treating the person. So that's the difference. And therefore, when I'm making any recommendations, it's individualized and it's personalized to that individual. So even if two people come to see me with, say, hay fever, they might leave with very different prescriptions because it depends on how it's manifesting for them, how it's presenting for them. And so then after the consultation, I will then spend again more time doing research and putting together a detailed plan, sort of health plan for my patient, along with a prescription. So I will blend something that is bespoke to what that person needs. And then we'll monitor that, over the months. So that's sort of a typical day. So you can see it's not just the time that you spend seeing patients, but it's the time before and the time after as well. So there's quite a lot that goes on in there. But that's really exciting because it's so interesting. Everybody's different. And when you get that prescription right for that person, I've just seen lives changed, and that's really exciting for me to be part of that and to be able to help people and actually to see those changes. So that's one aspect of the day. Another day I might be teaching. So one of the things that I feel particularly strongly about is that I think making natural health information and herbal information as accessible and as practical as possible. So I do teach, I do talks, public workshops on different themes, depending what people are interested in. Or I might be teaching at a college. So I'm involved in training the next generation of herbalists, which is very exciting. And I'm also sometimes do some mentoring as well of newly qualified herbalists. So it's quite a variety of things. So there's no typical day, actually, in that sense. It's quite varied, and that's something that I really enjoy. Other herbalists might be involved. I mean, that's the great thing about this job, is that you can actually go in lots of different directions. Some herbalists I know are really interested in the research side of things, so they might get more involved with on research, whether that's herbal research for companies or on the academic side as well. Some people like to go into the product side using their herbal knowledge. So that it really, there's quite a variety and scope of applying, your herbal skills to whatever area really interests you.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. That's really good. And I love the fact that there is so much research happening with patients and clients. I love the variety as well, but that particular point, as someone who's worked always in healthcare, so I started working in healthcare when I was 19 years old, working in step down unit. So know allopathic medicine fairly well. Um, and they always say that it takes about 10 to 15 years for anything that happens in research to actually make it into, clinical practice. And you think about it for a herbalist, that it doesn't take 10, 15 years because you'll come and get a patient with a particular disorder, psoriasis, let's say, and you're going to look at the latest papers right then and there before they even come in. And you're going to digest and you're going to assess that. So I love the fact it's so academic and research and
Yeah,
scientific base,
yeah,
and you can actually branch out and really specialize in that stuff.
yeah.
So it's
And the other thing to add to that as well is that actually we have the combination, because what we also have is not just more recent research, but we also have a lot of historical and traditional knowledge, and a good knowledge base there for us to tap into. So to take your example for psoriasis, I've got a whole bank of information of herbs historically used for psoriasis as well, and how it was used. So there's a lot of that traditional knowledge there as well to add into that. So it's quite a range there. We've got the best of both worlds,
yeah.
actually. And then there's so many other layers that you can add into that as well. Depending on how a herbalist wants to practice, there is also a looking at the person's constitution. There's another aspect that you never really get to see in academic papers, which is purely based on experience as a herbalist, which is how people respond to herbs.
Yeah.
Some people are more sensitive and will respond in a very different way. So, that really comes from clinical experience, which all adds into that as well. So, yeah, it's a good, I think it's a very look in terms of looking at the knowledge base, there's a really good well-rounded uh pool of knowledge to tap into.
No, I absolutely agree. And I'm going to ask you, do you have a favorite herb? And it kind of touches into people not realizing how this ancient practice really takes a lot of science to it. In
Yeah,
my science, I am talking about constitution, spiritual science, all of that is a science. They just only look at one aspect of maybe physical sciences or something like that. But we know that there's all sorts of energetic reactions, not even just with energetic medicine, but what's going on inside of you,
yeah.
outside of you, and how that energy affects your overall health. So I'm going to ask you if you have a favorite herb. And what I notice is that dandelion's my favorite herb, and it really works for my chronic skin condition. I have something called hidradenitis suppurativa, HS, and it's really chronic autoimmune condition. And I've taken dandelion teas before and it did nothing. But then when I realized dandelion tinctures and it was a pure herb and it was working, I was like, oh my God, this is like my miracle herb. So, what's yours, and what advice would you give to people if they're finding, ooh, I take herbs all the time, but they don't really do anything?
Oh, asking which is my favorite herb is like asking me to choose between my children. It's hard. It's really hard. But actually, you know what? A herb that I do use a lot, funnily enough, is dandelion root, to sort of to come to tie into what you're saying. And there's a reason for that. So dandelion root is a really good and effective liver herb, and working with digestion as well. So probably why you're getting quite a lot of benefit from taking dandelion is precisely for that reason, is that it's working on improving the sort of detoxification aspects of the liver. It's also slightly bitter, and anything that's bitter is good for digestion because we've got bitter receptors on our tongue. So when we have something bitter, it immediately starts to secrete saliva. Our gastric secretions start to get activated. So that's why another reason why it's really good. And I often recommend to my patients to include more bitter foods, bitter tasting foods in their diet, like bitter leaves and things like that, into their salads, it's so forth, because that bitter taste is actually really good for us. And that's why if you go to see a herbalist and they prescribe you a tincture or a powder, we don't just operate in tinctures. It can sometimes be a tea as well. Sometimes there is a reason why it might taste a little bit better. It might be deliberate because actually there's a benefit, a health benefit to that. And dandelion root, so there's dandelion leaf and dandelion root, and they've medicinally been used for different things. I call it nature's sort of gift of two for the price of one, because the different parts of the herb are used for slightly different things. So dandelion leaf, which is a common weed that most people want to get rid of. Please don't get rid of the dandelions if you see them in your gardens. They're really medicinally potent. So in the spring, when they're sort of they're up and growing, you can the leaf, you can have it as an edible. So you can pick it and have it as a salad, like a rocket leaf. You treat it in exactly the same way. But dandelion leaves, you can dry it and have it as a tea, and it's a good diuretic. So often it's very good for people who've got water retention, puffy ankles, puffy sort of swollen ankles and puffy knees and so forth. So it's a really good diuretic. So it helps you to pass water more quickly. And the root, which we harvest in the autumn, is fantastic for the liver. It also really helps with oh, sorry, I'm sounding like I'm rambling.
No, it's perfect. Keep going, keep going.
I get carried away. But yes, just to say, the other thing that's really good for as well, and why it's really helpful for digestion, is because it helps with bile secretion. So your liver makes bile, and your gallbladder stores bile. So when you have dandelion root, it just helps stimulate that secretion of bile. And that's another reason why it's really good for your digestion too. And you can have dandelion root in all sorts. You can get dandelion root coffee, as a coffee substitute. You can find it as a, roasted and used as a coffee substitute. It's got a nice sort of earthy, bitter taste to it. So I agree with you. I think dandelion is a fantastic herb. It's a fantastic herb, and I use lots of it, because most people that come to me tend to need some digestive support and some liver support. So herbalists will often include a liver herb in their prescriptions, because our livers work very, very hard clearing all these wastes and toxins. And so, we're quite overburdened with it, with daily living and toxicity. So we generally include some sort of liver herb usually in a prescription.
Oh, thank you.
Was there another question you asked me? I forgot. I get carried away talking about...
I asked you your favorite one, and kind of how do people decide which herb which formulation is right for them. I mean, people usually go to the average high street, right? And they'll go to the average health shop and they'll think that they're having nettle, or they'll think that they're having dandelion. And some brands are really, really good, but some brands aren't. And I think that I know of a client of mine that I had that was back home in the States. We used to have Zoom consultations, and she would go off and buy, I'm just coaching, so I'm not prescribing for her, but she would do research and she would go off and buy all of these supplements. And I would try to tell her, well, that's not really that. This isn't really that. There's lots of additives in it, or there was the dosage didn't really make a lot of sense. And this is me being a student training, like, not so great. But she really had a hard time, like quite legitimately, understanding that potentially the way she's taking these things are not going to help. So what sort of tips can you give to people when they're trying to be novice herbalists themselves, going on the internet, finding things? I mean, ideally they should see a herbalist first. I mean, that's the real advice. But let's say they're doing it themselves. What sort of advice?
Okay, well, a couple of things I think. A good rule of thumb is really check firstly, it's what herbs do you want to take? What is it that you're trying to get relief from? The internet is not always terribly helpful, because there's a lot of incorrect information about what herbs are good for this and what herbs are good for that. So I would say keep it really simple. Um, for example, if you just want a very good general supportive herb that's safe to take, stick to things like good quality sort of loose leaf type herbs. So things like your dandelion, nettle teas are really good. Ideally, if you can source organic teas, that's even better. And I would say try and get loose leaf rather than in tea bags, because then you have this whole issue of, bags being bleached, and you don't actually get what I find with any sort of teas that are in bags is that they're quite stingy with the amount of herb that you actually get in the bag. Whereas if it's loose leaf, you can make it as strong as you want. And the great thing about nettle leaf tea is it's a great cleanser for the spring. So if you want to do a nice sort of gentle cleansing, it's also rich in minerals. So it's great for hair, skin, and nails.
That's
Nettle
always a
tea.
plus.
Yeah, it's a plus. Also, if you suffer from any sort of seasonal allergies, it's also nature's antihistamine as well. So that's another reason why. And when you look at nature, where do we see nettles spring up from? In the spring. So it's naturally a spring cleansing herb. Mother Nature has given us this great antihistamine, herb, knowing that, people tend to, the season's coming and people might have allergies. So that's a really, good, safe herb to have. A couple of other tips. The thing about tinctures is that they really vary in quality. So I think it is probably best to go to, either check with your herbalist, because often the strength of the tinctures are not very strong, those that are available for public sale. And that's to do with, various regulations and various other things that are not very interesting for the lay person. But check in with your herbalist and try and get tinctures that are, if you want to take them, that are of good quality. So reputable herbal companies, and you can then check them out to see if they where they source their herbs, and they will generally have a policy on whether they have adhered to good manufacturing practices. So those are probably the best bet, I would say. But rather than take lots and lots of herbs, think about what is it you need? What's your health concern? And then look at sourcing the appropriate herb for that. But really, diet and lifestyle is key as well. So there's no
Yeah.
point taking really lovely, gorgeous herbal teas that support your health if you're leading a rock and roll lifestyle. So, that,
Exactly.
it has to be both. And actually, I'll just coming back to your question of, what would be my favorite herb. It's not that it's a favorite herb, but a herb that I think is a really like the superfood equivalent of a herb that often gets forgotten about. And the reason I really love it, because it's so accessible, we find it in our kitchen cupboard, and I would say garlic. Garlic is
Yeah.
a potent antibacterial, it's an antiviral, and it's antifungal. And it's in our kitchens, it's easily accessible. So I'd say that's a really good,
Yeah.
cure-all herb as a first port of call, really. So, colds, flus, any kind of infections that you might have as well. That's a good tip, actually. You don't need to
Yeah.
go to far off places to find medicines, herbal medicines. Most people have got garlic. We might have ginger as well, which is another really great healing herb, really warming, great for digestion. Most of us have got peppermint tea maybe in the cupboard.
Yeah.
That's another great herb for digestion. If you're after we've had a very heavy meal, or if you get sort of, like a lot of colic or wind as well. But if you have acid reflux, if you suffer from acid reflux, you're better off going for chamomile rather than peppermint. So
Those are really great tips. Thank you. And the bit about how your kitchen really has medicine in it. People do forget,
yeah,
and one of the things that I did, I said, look, put me on camera and show me your kitchen. And it was surprising how much she already had. Things that shouldn't have been there, but there were things that she already had that could help if she just ate it a bit more and included it in more meals and not just kind of sit the garlic for decoration in the middle of the kitchen, but actually smash it and leave it and cook with it.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah,
no, that's so true. Thank you for that. And I'm
yeah.
sorry I've had to, the herbs are probably upset now because they know you've been picking out children. And they're probably gonna tease dandelion and garlic for a while.
I know. Well, I hope not. Hope they haven't heard.
um, so I work in a high stress environment, and I was plagued with stress actually. I was one of those people who thought a 60-hour week was totally normal. I used to smoke as well, so I thought, getting stressed standing outside smoking a cigarette was healthy. I even got to a point where I thought quitting smoking would actually be bad for health because I would take my walk in the middle of the day with my cigarette. So I was like, yeah, dude, it's all right. But it was having its toll, and I don't think I noticed it. It creeped up. I think with COVID-19, because of all the lockdowns and stuff like that, you start to notice that the stress is having an impact. But still, I didn't know what to do with it. So I first started going down the path of personal trainers and stuff like that, thinking it was kind of a discipline thing.
Mm.
And then even on occasion, I would think, why am I even bothering with stress? It is making me a more successful person. Like I'm actually moving up in my job. So how bad is it? But we all know that you come to a crash, don't you? And it doesn't sustain. Um, People don't think naturopaths, or I guess I didn't think naturopath in terms of dealing with stress, dealing with sleeplessness a bit because there's things like valerian and stuff like that. But I don't think I thought, oh, let's see a naturopathic herbalist for my stress. So just talk a bit about how you deal with stress in your practice and kind of your thoughts about people getting used to stress and how that could potentially be really devastating for healthy life expectancy and all sorts of things, just being a vital person.
Um, well done you for realizing that stress was not helpful or beneficial, and making those changes. Um, Seeing a herbalist or a naturopath is exactly the way to go for dealing with stress. Um, and the reason is this. Let me just say a little bit about stress, because actually, funnily enough, I was just teaching at the last weekend a public workshop, and I was talking about stress and the impact that it has. And I see this a lot in my clinic when people come to me with all sorts of issues. But when you look back at the root cause, it's because of stress. And then it's manifesting in the body with things like digestive issues, sleeplessness, anxiety, depression, but it has stress as its root cause. Now, the thing about stress is actually a little bit of stress is normal. It's actually an evolutionary way of keeping us safe. So if we heard of our fight or flight, where we have this fabulous, our bodies are just amazing mechanisms, it does all these things and processes, most of which we are totally unaware of. And one of the things that it has, this mechanism, is called fight or flight, which is an evolutionary system designed to keep us safe from harm and danger. So it's this thing of, for example, if you're faced with a big scary bear, your immediate instinct is fear. You start to maybe feel the palms of your hands going sweaty. The heart starts pumping really, really fast. And what is happening at that moment is your body is pumping out a couple of hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. And what this does, it gives you either the energy that you need to run away from the big scary bear, or stand up to it and fight it off. And this is an evolutionary safety device. Now, what happens is once the threat has gone, our body resets and we go back to normal. But what I'm seeing more and more of is that our bodies, a lot of us are staying in this fight or flight response, this chronic stressed response that we see all the time. Now, obviously, we're not being faced with a big, scary bear these days, but it might be more to do with sort of work pressures, financial pressures, all sorts of things, the constant bombardment that we have, never really switching off in this 24/7 society. So we have this chronic drip feed of stress. And what happens is our adrenal glands that produce these hormones then start to become less efficient. We find that we're not able maybe to produce as much of them. And therefore, actually, we find that our resistance to stress becomes lowered. What's happening as well is during this fight or flight response, is our body's really clever. It's saying, well, hang on, this is an emergency threat situation. Therefore, do we need, think of it a bit like when you have your TV or your computer, you power it down, don't you, when you need it, you put it on silent. That's what's happening. In order to produce those emergency hormones, our body sort of powers down various other body systems because it doesn't need it. So if we're in an emergency situation, we're trying to fight off this scary bear, do we need our immune system? Not really. It puts it on power down. Do we need our digestive system in this emergency situation? Not really. It powers it down. Do we need our reproductive hormones to be working? Fertility? Not really. We'll power it down. So you can see that in an emergency situation, all of those things are sort of powered down. The volume is turned down on those functions. Makes sense in an emergency situation. But as I said, if we've got this chronic ongoing stress, then that means those body systems, they're all still powered down. And this is the mechanism by how stress negatively impacts our health. It impacts everything in a very detrimental way. And I was reading some very interesting research that showed if you eat your dinner in front of a TV when you're watching something bad news, for example, or really, or a soap opera where, it's a very dramatic and distressing storyline, that our digestive function reduces by a third.
Wow.
So,
Oh,
yeah, so you can just see how, if you've got a really stressful job and this is going on for months and months and months and maybe years, why you end up in burnout, because just everything is powered down. You cannot continue to run at that emergency rate. So I do see this a lot in clinic. And the great thing is, though, having said all of that, we do have some herbs that are really effective at addressing this burnout, this stress response, to help get people back on an even keel. And it supports your adrenal glands. That's how these herbs are working. And they also work on the nervous system, because the nervous system is also involved in your stress response. So sorry, that was a very long-winded
no.
answer, but I just wanted to get across to to whoever's going to be watching this, how negatively stress affects people. And it can affect your digestion, it can affect your fertility, particularly. It affects hormones, both male and female. It affects your immunity. How many of us know, we've come down for a cold and come down with a cold, and then we thought to ourselves, anecdotally, actually, yeah, I have been feeling a bit run down in the last few weeks. So we sort of know it ourselves personally, because we've all experienced it in some ways. When we're run down, we've been doing too much, we become more susceptible to infections. And this is the reason why. So there's lots of fantastic herbs that are very supportive, nutritive, to get people back on an even keel, who are overstressed. Now, as you know as well, Charlie, the other aspect is you've got to look at your lifestyle and what's causing the stress. So if you're doing 60 hours a week, then if you're able to modify that in some way, then that's going to make a big difference to your sleep, to your overall health. So that's going to make a big difference. So yes, herbs really work with that, and definitely seeing a naturopath, seeing a herbalist is really going to make a difference for people who are really struggling with stress.
Because I find that it's the discipline not to exercise or not to even eat right, really. It's the discipline to not stress. And I know that sounds a bit bizarre, but it is. It's kind of knowing your stress triggers and rejecting them. And that's really hard for people who work like the sort of jobs where people are reliant on them or dependent on them or there's lots of money involved or anything like that. It's kind of this is the way it should be, and this is actually a plus side. And I find that with people who can't sleep, it's a very common thing. My mom actually said that she doesn't like the idea of going to sleep early because she had all these extra hours in the day. Now she was completely run down and fatigued, but she liked the fact that it was only 3 hours of sleep because she got a lot done. And I would have colleagues who were, a good night for them was 4 hours of sleep, and they liked it because they could get on emails at like 4 o'clock in the morning, get ahead of the day. Um, I
Oh,
know. So, what would you say to people who are actually the reason they're not seeing good people like yourself is because they're reluctant to get better. They see how stress is beneficial. What would you say that they're doing to themselves, their sleep, their bodies, by thinking that this is an okay way to live?
no. What I would say to them is, hope to they probably don't notice it, or they're reluctant to do so because they're able to continue in that way. There will come a time where they won't be able to. They're going to get burnout because it's not sustainable. It's a bit like running your car all the way in fifth gear. You can't do that all the time. It's there for a purpose, for short bursts where we might need to do that, but it's not sustainable. That's the thing. So it's it's trying to think about how you can pace yourself. Think about longevity. So that you can't work at that level of intensity over a long period of time. So try and build in more rest times and more break times to pace yourself. Now, if that's not something you're used to doing, it's something you kind of have to practice a little bit. The nighttime is there for a reason. It's there for sleep. And actually, that's really important for our body's repair, because that's when our repair, our repair processes are happening. And actually, there's some really interesting research again showing that people who have small amounts of sleep, if you're getting less than 6 hours of sleep, it actually puts you at higher risk of cardiovascular diseases and vascular dementia.
Mm.
So sleep is actually really important. It's not wasted time. It's time that we need to repair and heal. So maybe for those sorts of people who are used to maybe always being on the go, I'm not going to say go and meditate because that's not realistic for people who are usually on the go and very busy and very active. But go for a walk, for example, with no phones or anything at all. So at least that way you're moving. There is a sense of movement. You feel like you're moving, you're not standing still, but actually you are taking time out for yourself. And actually you're getting the benefits of exercise and being out in the fresh air. So I find for those types of people who are very, very busy and on the go, that actually walking is really helpful for them. And try and reduce your devices. So particularly if you have trouble sleeping, you should really not be on any screens for at least an hour or 2 hours, couple of hours at least, before you go to bed, because that light that you get from looking at screens depresses your sleep hormone, melatonin, which actually we need dark for it to increase at night. So naturally the levels should increase at night. And when we are subjecting ourselves to our phone screens, our TVs, our laptops, whatever, that's reducing that production of that hormone. So really easy things. I think people like that need to maybe just reduce their screen time. Just slowly, you can wean yourself off. Do it very, very gently. Walking, to take breaks, and to actually, sleep. So 3 hours, 4 hours sleep really isn't sufficient. It needs to have longer sleep. so that you feel refreshed and recuperated. That then gives you a bit of headspace to then see
Mm.
what else you can do. Um, but that I think would be a good starting point, I think, for people. Um, because what I find as well is people who are constantly on the go, to keep that up, need to generally find themselves turning to stimulants. So this is where then the caffeine comes in. You get that sort of afternoon slump, or this is where, oh, I'll just have a chocolate cake because I need the sugar for the energy. So it then leads you to sort of more unhealthy choices, which don't really benefit you in the end. So
And
is that helpful? Just sort of
no,
some very
that's
easy things.
very, and they're simple. It kind of feels like when I first started turning off my devices, about 9:30 is when it goes off
Mm,
really. Um, and sometimes earlier, I first got an app that told me how much screen time I was using. So that was the first thing. But it was a very scary thing to take these things away. And I think the biggest benefit of me walking at lunchtime and making sure I made time for that, going to sleep at a decent hour, really getting that 7 to 8 hours of sleep. It's when work became easier. Decision making was quicker. So, it's what you've said about lack of sleep increasing the risk of vascular dementia. You can see kind of early dementia coming in, and then you work harder. But as soon as I kind of took a step back, I
mm.
got the benefits where I was actually more efficient. So it seems scary at first, just for anybody who's watching this. It is terrifying once your naturopath takes away your devices and takes away your coffee. It's almost like they don't understand, and it's like taking literally candy from babies. Like you start
Yeah,
crying
well,
and
it's
just
always, I always say
devastated.
it's a negotiation. I never say I'm taking anything away from you or banning. I usually like to add things in, and I say it's a negotiation. So if a client of mine is really struggling with it, we do it incrementally. So for some people going cold turkey might be a bit much, so we can do it incrementally. But like you say, you find actually it's a misconception that the more you work, the more efficient you are. You're actually more productive and more focused when you do take some proper rest, as you have probably found.
Yeah.
You're more productive actually. You can think clearer. So you'll be better at your job, but it's just doing it steadily. When you're making changes, any sort of changes or changing habits, um, for those that are really scared of doing that, you can do it
Yeah.
incrementally. And what I would say, this is about making that choice to value you. Why do you think you are not worth having rest and sleep? You deserve that. You deserve to look after yourself. You deserve to prioritize yourself. It's all about balance, and I think sometimes the balance is we forget ourselves in the whole list of things that we need to do. But it's also important to remember ourselves as well.
Mm.
I don't want to
That's
say anything like that, the advert, you're worth it. But we do, most of us do need to think a bit more like that. And I often say to my patients that you be kinder to yourself. I think we demand too much of ourselves. I think our expectations of ourselves, especially sort of today in modern times, is incredibly exacting,
mm.
and I think we have far higher expectations and demands on ourselves than maybe previous generations did. I think we're too exacting. We need to be kinder. We need to be gentler with ourselves, and in that way, we will be able to be kinder and gentler with each other. But it starts with us.
Oh, that's really nice, and the incremental changes. You're absolutely right, and it felt like self-care. I mean, I think I've been going
Yeah.
on this health journey. I think it's 2 years now. It may be 18 months. It could be 2 years, but the last 10 months have been the most accelerated.
Mm.
And making it a bit of a side job of helping people be healthier. You then learn about yourself, but it is that kind of gentle self-care, not rushing it. Because I mean, I think I just recently was able to get rid of coffee. By recent, I think I haven't been drinking coffee for maybe about 10 months to a year. But it took a while for that. And I gave myself that grace.
Yeah,
Because, God gives us that grace. I mean, I'm a believer in God, but if you
yeah,
think about that, dandelions will grow irrespective of the weather, irrespective of us knowing their usefulness. God keeps giving us dandelions. We keep ignoring them, but it always happens. There's like no rush for these things. But I
yeah.
just remember, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I've even seen dandelions growing even when there isn't soil. I've seen them just growing in between a pile of leftover bricks. They're very resilient plants. Nature sort of will just do what she needs to do. And when you were talking about your own journey there, about the changes, the other thing I would like to say and reassure people watching this is that progress isn't necessarily linear. So you might be kind of doing things incrementally, and you might then have a bit of a setback. That's fine. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just reset. You say, okay, fine, and then just carry on. It's absolutely fine. So progress isn't always linear. Sometimes you might go back and then go forwards a little bit and so on. And that's absolutely fine as well. So again, be gentle with yourself and take it easy.
Oh, thank you. That's really helpful. Um I think too, another question I want to ask you, and it is on the line of gentleness, is that how do people know what their root cause is? Of course, they'll come to a naturopath and a herbalist, and they'll help them say, well, actually, it's your stress or your anxiety levels or something that happened in the past in terms of their health history. But, a lot of times what creates this sort of going on WebMD, popping in your symptoms, that kind of internet searching, is that people don't know how to connect with their bodies. They're not being gentle with themselves. They're thinking they have notions about themselves. This is very common. I hear it all the time. People have imposter syndrome. They think they can't do certain things. They can't progress in their careers. They have no discipline. And it's very negative. I mean, if you ask people to describe themselves, you hear some things that you're just like, oh, I'm not getting that at all. Why are you saying this about yourself? But I think it comes from people not knowing how to connect to themselves. What advice would you give to get people kind of thinking about how do they know what their own root cause is or what it could be or how to think about themselves and their health?
Hmm. I think that's quite a complicated
It is.
question. Because it's very individual. So some of it is down to, look, some people are more self-aware than others. So for some people, they are very kind of connected. And for other people, they might just not be and not have a clue. In which case, sometimes it can be helpful to have an objective opinion, whether that's a herbalist or a naturopath or someone who can maybe do that full case history. So really, especially I think these days, I think modern living probably doesn't help because
Mm,
we have so many distractions. Um, and you know, we're probably, I would say, more disconnected than
mm,
previous generations or we previously were, and I think that seems to be the way things are heading. Um, and I think it's just a question of us as humans to make more of an effort to be more connected. In order to connect to ourselves, we do also need to connect with others. So, look around you, maybe get involved. If you're not everybody's a self-reflective type, right? So I'm not going to say here and say, go within and meditate and do all of these things. If that's not really it doesn't resonate with you. If not, then do something local, maybe in your community where they're getting involved. I think play to your strengths. So if you're someone that maybe, for example, likes working with children, maybe you can volunteer at your local play group, to connect with others. Finding grounding. This is most of us are quite ungrounded because of the society that we live in. Very, very busy, fast, fast, fast. We're always going here and there. We've got to get to A to B to C to, that's just how things are. So if you're someone who so if you're that way inclined, maybe do something in your local community, whatever your interest is, whether it's you want to maybe do local gardening, or you maybe want to help out with your local aged scheme. That might be a way for some people to feel that connection. It also helps us to take us out of our heads, do something else, and slow down. This is basically the essence. When you slow down, you get headspace, and when you get the headspace, you can start to see things a bit better.
Mm.
So it's not a one size fits all solution, but it can be helpful for people. If you find that you're very in your head, one thing I sometimes recommend, and this is a sort of a little bit of an energetic remedy for those people that are into that. I don't know if people have heard of flower remedies, the Bach flower remedies. If you're someone who's always got very lots of thoughts whirring around in their head, very in your head all the time, you can try white chestnut. So a couple of drops in some water can be very helpful for those people who are very in their heads. Also things like that I recommend as well, things like Epsom salts. If you don't want to have a bath, if you're not a bath person, you can do it as a foot soak, as a foot bath. One of the great things about Epsom salts is that they basically contain minerals like magnesium, which are really good relaxants. So again, I find they're very good for people who are very in their heads, ungrounded. So those are a few practical things that people can try. But it does take practice to become self-aware. You might not necessarily get all of the answers and might not get to the root cause, but there's lots of different avenues that you can try.
And it opens you up because I think that when you're able to settle down and be quiet,
Mm.
you can see opportunities. So, they always say in digital or tech, to be innovative, sometimes you just need to go into a dark room and there's actually nothing around, and then the idea will come to you. And that's the same with your own life and body, So I like that, just the slowing down and
Slowing
um,
down, yeah,
connecting with others, because it's when you connect with others, and you gave the example of children will sometimes say to you what your root cause is, and children say you're allergic to everything, and they'll
yeah,
just tell you, and you say, oh, maybe I do need to see an herbalist and see what to do
yeah,
about my allergies, and it's that human connection, just like how plants have that connection with us.
yeah,
We need
yeah,
to connect with each other as well. So no, I love those examples, and I do have white chestnut downstairs.
yeah. And the plants talk to each other as well. I think one of the key things that's really important is for us to spend time in nature. I think most of us live in cities now, and it's very nourishing, as again, and there's lots of really useful interesting research showing how the health benefits of humans, people spending time in nature, even if it's just walking and sitting in your local park. If you're lucky enough to have a garden, just sit in your garden, but being surrounded by greenery has shown to lower blood pressure, has shown to just reduce anxiety levels. So as much time as we can spend in greenery is really beneficial for us as humans, and that will bring some of those, quiet moments, give us time for a bit of reflection, and also gets us out into the fresh air. I love this idea. I mean, this concept of just going out in nature. In Japan, they have a term for it called forest bathing. I love that.
Wow, I love
Forest,
that.
forest bathing. Just go out. Into the forest, into the trees, but the idea that you can bathe, instead of sunbathing, you're forest bathing. I love that idea, but it's that concept of just being in nature. Any little nature that you can get is really beneficial. I think we sometimes forget that, when we're stuck in the office all day or in front of a computer screen. That as
Yeah.
humans, we have a connection to the earth, and we need to be connected to that. I think that
Yeah.
will help a lot as well. I'm rambling again. Sorry,
No,
sorry.
no, this is really good. It is really because, even people who will watch this, taking the time to listen to those things, because I was first inspired before I changed anything. So thank you. No, ramble away. The interview is coming. toward the end though, because I had loads of questions about stress, and you touched on everything that even questions I was going to ask, you already touched on it about digestion and detoxification and the benefits of that to for your overall health and um, different chronic illnesses and skin conditions. So, and you told us why you've gone on your journey. So it's this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for for the time. It's the last question is just more about you. You know, if and we talked a lot about stress, but of course you see people with a wide range of conditions and different things. Um, how does someone get in touch with you? Where do they see you and find you and follow you? Of course, I'm all in social media world, so I don't know if you have Instagrams and stuff like that, but how
I
do people find you?
I have a website. I'm not on social media as such. I'm an old school person. I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah, that's all right.
I am. People can sometimes hear me, so I do quite talks. If people want to come and hear me talk, I do education workshops, online and in person. Alternatively, they can go to my website and there's information on there. Or they can come and see me as obviously if they want to see me as a patient. So I practice from London, central London. So I'm happy if anyone wants to get in touch. Happy to talk to them about how I can help them on their health journey. I really do. One of the things I love about my job is that I'm helping people to optimize their health. And see those changes and make a difference. And that's really exciting. To be able to have that impact, but also the fact that people are trusting me with their health. For me, I see that as a privilege to be in that position of trust. So I do try to do my best.
I feel healthier talking to you. So I know that
Really?
my
That's
comments. So
great.
I feel like I've cheated a bit that I did the interview and I was able to get loads of great tips. I bypassed. So probably other people will be asking you for interviews too, because it's been very healing and
I don't
helpful.
normally do interviews actually. This is my very first interview. So I hope I haven't been rambling too much. I just get too
No,
carried away.
no, it's been fantastic. And you know, it that spiritual component, that understanding that it is a privilege to spend time in people's health and people entrust you with their health and people have come to you. I think sometimes working in other health arenas, people forget what a sacred bond that is, you know, and how to maximize that engagement for both people because like we were talking about people enrich each other. I know I've been enriched by the few clients that I've had. They've enriched me and I've enriched them, not just in terms of weight loss or something like that, which is great. That was a bonus. I guess that's why they were talking to me. But just that kind of growing and understanding yourself and slowing down and having a better life and having
Yeah.
greater vitality and optimism about life. Because, you know, I mean, if you look in the news, I'm now not going to eat while watching the news. Thank you for telling me that, because I tend to do that, actually flip through the news while I eat. And that could be why I do have indigestion afterwards, you know. Um, so, yeah, I mean, this is I'm babbling now, but this has been really useful and really helpful. And thank you for your time. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Pleasure. I hope your viewers will have get some practical tips from that because as I say, I think this knowledge of health really should be as accessible as possible because it is, as I say, it's ancient wisdom, it's our knowledge that our ancestors had, and I think it's we're duty bound to pass it on and spread it as widely as possible. Because when you have that knowledge of how you can help yourself and your health, it's like I say, it's very powerful. It's yours forever.
Oh, thank you.